The gathering storm. It was the summer of 1985 when a small town in the Midwest found itself thrust into the grip of terror. The townsfolk were accustomed to thunderstorms, but what they experienced that fateful night was far from ordinary. It was a storm that not only rattled windows but also shook the very core of their reality, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with strokes of orange and pink. The residents of Oakwood went about their usual evening routines. Children played outside, their laughter echoing in the stillness of the summer air, while mothers called them in for dinner. It was a typical day in a town that prided itself on its close-knit community and peaceful existence. Martha, the local librarian, was finishing up her shift. She always found solace among the stacks of dusty books, but that evening, she felt an unusual tension in the air. The sky had turned a deep gray, and the wind began to pick up, howling like a wounded animal. She glanced outside and saw a gathering of clouds that seemed darker than usual, swirling ominously above as she looked up. She overheard two of the older residents discussing the strange weather patterns they had been experiencing over the past few weeks. "It's been too dry for too long," one said, frowning at the approaching storm. "I fear we're in for something big." That night, the storm rolled in with a ferocity that was hard to comprehend. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the town in brief, eerie flashes, while thunder roared like a feral beast. The wind howled through the streets, rattling shutters and uprooting branches from trees. It felt as if the world was being torn apart. Martha sat in her living room, clutching a mug of tea. She turned on the television, hoping for some reassurance from the local news. Instead, the weatherman's face was grave as he warned of a severe thunderstorm warning, advising residents to take cover. The words "tornado watch" sent a chill down her spine. The storm intensified. Rain pounded against the windows like fists demanding entry. Suddenly, a blinding flash of lightning struck nearby, followed by a deafening clap of thunder. Martha jumped, spilling her tea. In that moment, she felt a strange sensation wash over her, as if she were being watched. She shook her head, dismissing it as the product of her overactive imagination. As the storm raged on, the power flickered and then went out, plunging her home into darkness. The howling wind was accompanied by an unsettling silence, broken only by the sound of rain lashing against the roof. Martha grabbed a flashlight, her hands trembling as she moved through her house, searching for her emergency supplies. Outside, the storm grew wilder. From her window, Martha could see the silhouettes of her neighbors, who were also struggling against the elements. Suddenly, a scream pierced the night, a chilling sound that sent a jolt of adrenaline through her veins. It was coming from the direction of the park. Without thinking, Martha rushed outside, her heart pounding in her chest. The rain soaked her instantly, but she pressed on, drawn by the haunting cry. As she neared the park, she noticed other townsfolk gathering, their faces illuminated by flashes of lightning. Panic spread among them like wildfire, and it wasn't long before they realized they were not alone in the heart of the park. A group of people huddled around something on the ground. Martha pushed her way through, gasping when she saw what lay before her. A young girl, no older than 10, curled up and shaking. Her eyes were wide with fear, and she was muttering something under her breath. "What happened?" Martha asked, her voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. The girl looked up, her expression a mix of terror and confusion. "I saw it," she whispered. "In the woods. It was watching me." Before anyone could respond, the ground trembled beneath their feet, and a bone-chilling wind swept through the park, extinguishing their flashlights. In the darkness, a voice echoed, a low, guttural sound that seemed to emanate from the storm itself. It was as if the very air was alive, whispering secrets that no one was meant to hear. "What was that?" someone cried out. Panic erupted, and the crowd dispersed in a frenzy. Martha felt a surge of fear, urging her to flee, but she couldn't leave the girl behind. "Stay close to me," she shouted, grabbing the child's hand as they stumbled through the chaos. They made their way to Martha's house, which had become a makeshift refuge for several neighbors seeking shelter from the storm. The atmosphere was tense, charged with a sense of impending doom. As the wind howled outside, the group gathered in her living room, sharing stories of their experiences that night. One neighbor, Mr. Thompson, recounted how he had seen shadows flitting through the trees near the park. "They weren't just shadows," he insisted, his voice trembling. "They were alive. They were watching us." The girl, still shaken, nodded in agreement. "I felt it too. It wanted something. It was hungry." Martha felt a chill run down her spine. She tried to remain rational, but the combination of fear and the oppressive storm made it difficult to think straight. They all knew that something was wrong. This storm was not like any other. Hours passed as the storm continued its relentless assault. Outside, the wind screamed, and lightning lit up the night sky. Inside, the group remained huddled together, sharing whispered fears and exchanging nervous glances. It felt as if time itself had come to a standstill. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the storm quieted. The wind ceased, and the rain became a gentle patter. A strange calm settled over Oakwood, and for a moment, it felt as if the terror had passed. "We should go outside," Martha suggested, her voice shaky. "See if the worst is over." Reluctantly, the group nodded in agreement. They stepped outside, cautious and on edge. The air was thick with tension, and the landscape appeared surreal under the pale light of the moon. The storm had left its mark. Fallen branches, debris scattered everywhere, and an unsettling silence that enveloped the town. But then, they noticed something. Dark figures moving in the distance, just beyond the treeline. The shadows seemed to shift and undulate, drawing closer, as if they were drawn to the light of their flashlights. Fear surged through Martha as she took a step back, her breath quickening. "What is that?" she gasped. The girl clutched Martha's hand tighter. "It's them," she whispered. "They've come for us." In a heartbeat, the once peaceful atmosphere transformed into chaos. The group scattered, retreating into the safety of Martha's house, slamming the door shut behind them. They could hear the shadows outside, a chorus of low, unintelligible murmurs, as if they were communicating with one another. Plotting. Martha's heart raced as she fumbled for her phone, praying for a signal. "We need to call for help," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But the phone was dead. The storm had knocked out all communication. Suddenly, the power surged back on, illuminating the room with a harsh glow. But instead of relief, it only heightened their fear. Outside, the shadows were now pressing against the windows, their forms indistinct but undeniably present. Martha felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over her as the storm regained its ferocity. A loud bang reverberated through the house. The front door rattled violently as something pounded against it. Martha grabbed the girl and pulled her close, shielding her with her body. The group huddled together, whispering frantic prayers as the shadows pressed closer. With a final, bone-jarring crash, the door burst open, and a wave of darkness flooded into the room. The townsfolk screamed, their voices swallowed by the chaos. Martha felt a cold rush envelop her, as if the very essence of fear had come alive. In that moment, she understood the truth. The storm was not merely a natural phenomenon. It was a harbinger of something ancient and sinister, awakened from its slumber by the tumultuous weather. The shadows were not just a manifestation of fear. They were real, and they had come for the souls of the unwary as the chaos consumed them. Martha felt a strange calmness wash over her. In the face of true terror, she realized that fighting was futile. Perhaps surrendering to the darkness was the only way to escape the nightmare that had taken hold of Oakwood. With a deep breath, she stepped forward, releasing the girl's hand. "We must accept what is happening," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "We can't fight it. We must embrace it." To her surprise, the shadows hesitated, their movements slowing as they regarded her. For a fleeting moment, a strange connection formed between Martha and the dark entities surrounding them. She felt their sorrow, their longing for something lost. When dawn finally broke, it revealed a town forever changed. The storm had passed, but the remnants of its terror lingered. Houses stood in disarray, windows shattered, and the landscape bore scars of destruction. But what haunted the survivors the most were the shadows that had vanished with the night, leaving behind a chilling sense of loss. Martha emerged from her home, shaken but resolute. She looked around at the faces of her neighbors, who, like her, wore expressions of disbelief and despair. They had survived the storm, but the darkness